collected over their life together. They could afford something better, something much bigger, maybe in Brooklyn or out in Hoboken, but they were Manhattanites to the bone and couldn't bear to be separated from the city by a bridge or a tunnel. Maybe it was silly, but between that and the fact that the rent was just $600 a month, as it had been since 1970, because the apartment had been grandfathered to Alan by his brother when his brother had moved to a lovely carriage house in Park Slope, they'd just stayed on there. The children they'd hoped for had never come. They'd never had a reason to expand. Only recently had things become uncomfortable for them. The new landlord knew he could be getting about $2,000 or $3,000 a month for their apartment, so he was very slow to fix things that broke, hoping to force them out. And in an old apartment in an old building, something was always broken. A fuse was always blown. Something was always leaking. They'd talked more about moving recently, but prices in the city were so outrageous. They'd lived a life where experience and travel had always mattered more to them than a status apartment or a flat-screen television. And though they'd done well, she as a crime reporter for various city newspapers and finally now at the Times, and he as a commercial photographer, choices had to be made along the way. Live well, travel well, and save for retirement, while doing without where the apartment was concerned. It had never been a difficult trade. They'd seen the world and were still explorers at heart. In their early 50s, they were in good shape to retire in the next 10 years, though they'd never owned any property. She was thinking about these things in the shower, when somewhere in the apartment, or maybe above or below them, there was a loud knocking, loud enough to startle her. It could have been the hot water heater, or something on another floor. She just prayed that it wasn't their guests arriving early, or the landlord wanting to finish the fight they'd had with him earlier about the terrible leak in the bathroom when the people above showered. Today they'd threatened to start putting their rent into escrow until he fixed it once and for all. The conversation had devolved into him reverting to his native tongue, something harsh and Eastern European, and screaming at them unintelligibly. They'd shut the door in his face and he'd stormed off, yelling all the way down the stairs. She stepped out of the shower now and covered herself in a towel, wrapped her long red hair in another, and brushed her teeth. There it was again, a knocking. This time, though, it was more of a heavy thud, and it seemed to come from the living room. She opened the bathroom door and called her husband's name. There was no answer. Her heart started to flutter as she called his name again. She saw something on the floor ahead of her. A glove? No, a hand. Her husband's hand on the floor. Everything seemed to slow down then. Her first thought was, heart attack. As she came around the corner and found him lying there, she knelt down to him and he fluttered his eyes at her, tried to talk. "Alan, it's okay, honey," she said, amazed at her own inner calm. Her voice sounded solid and sure. "I'll call an ambulance. Hang in there, baby, don't worry." It would be all right, she told herself with an odd stillness. Heart attacks were so survivable these days. He'd been taking his aspirin. She'd get him to sit up and take a dose while they waited for the ambulance. But then she saw the blood pooling out from beneath him, and the terror in his eyes. And then she saw the men standing by the door. They were fully dressed in black. One of them held a gun, the other a terrible serrated blade red with blood. Both of them wore ski masks. They blocked her passage to the phone. "What do you want?" she asked, her calm starting to retreat. "You can have anything you want." "Don't make a move," one of the men said. She couldn't tell which. The whole situation had taken on a foggy non-reality. Her mind struggled to keep up with what was happening. "Don't say a word." One of the men came at her quickly, and before she could even put up a fight, he'd grabbed her wrist and spun her around, placing a black shroud over her head and tightening it around her neck. In her deepest heart, she knew what this was about. She just couldn't bring herself to believe it. Then there was a stunning pain at the base of her neck and a star shower before her eyes. Then there was nothing. "I'm running.